Warning, some viewers may find the following footage deeply disturbing.
Genius.
Hi, this is the Kurt Wallace Show, and we have Chris Rossini with us today on Rand Paul Review. Chris is with the Ron Paul Institute and co-host of the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Kurt, it's great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you, and we're going to talk on economics. And thank you for taking the time. And as we always approach an economic discussion, because our audiences may have different levels of understanding and experience with it, let's set a baseline on what we're talking about when we talk about economics. We're not talking about just specifically how to balance a checkbook, but we're talking about human freedom and how economics relates to that. And that's really on the Austrian economic side. So, how would you describe the fundamental differences between what we're talking about in terms of fundamental rules of economics through Austrian school's view of free markets and then the other side of it, which is really the state of our economy here in the United States, which is it's really misunderstood. Are we a capitalist society? Are we a state corporatist society? Are we a Keynesian, which is going to be the other term, the opposite of Austrian in a sense, economics, in particular when it comes to government intervention in the economy. So, could you kind of help us to understand what we're talking about with these terms?
Sure. Economics, real economics, free market economics of the Austrian school, and it's only called Austrian school because the foundational economists came from Austria, but it's basically free market, private property economics versus the state-controlled and centralized planning of basically the other schools, Keynesians, monetarists, all the Chicago school. They're believers in the state um, centrally planning the economy with their mathematics and their tools. And there is nothing wrong with mathematics. There's nothing wrong with models per se, but they distort and give the sense that the economy can be controlled by a couple of central planners, which it cannot. They just create problems on top of problems on top of problems. Austrian economics is all about analyzing the individual. Now, each individual cannot be, you can't see in a person's mind. So, how they value things will never be known by an outsider. It could be predicted that you can have speculate as to what a person will do, and that's what business people and entrepreneurs do. They speculate. There's a market for this now. People desire this. Let's buy these resources, create these products because people desire this. But it is not foolproof because you can invest in a business and people do not want it anymore, or they moved on to something else. So it's always speculation. When you get to the statist economics, and it really shouldn't even be called economics, you have the exact opposite. You have people, sitting in their marble palaces saying, okay, if we just increase GDP this way, and if we raise the minimum wage, and if we pull this lever and press this button, we will get the results that we want. They may get a certain short-term result that they're looking for, but a real economist will criticize them and say, what you're doing is you're going to create more problems with your intervention. It's best to have people make their own decisions as to what they want to buy, where they want to work. Obviously, the government should be there to punish any type of violence or force or any fraud that happens. But outside of that, the government should stay out of the economy. We are not even in the same universe as that type of ideology dominating. We have where the government is involved in everything, every single industry, almost every product, the government is there somehow dictating. And it's a miracle that things still operate, still function, but things function because the market is extremely, extremely powerful and will still survive even despite all of the government interference. So Austrian economists basically take each policy, even if you're not an economist, you could just be a regular person. If you understand basic economic principles, when the government says, we're going to do this, you should have the knowledge of, okay, well, this is the reaction that we could expect, because there are no free lunches, and central planning, whether by a Soviet Politburo or a Federal Reserve Board, is impossible.
Well, okay. So can you explain the concepts that apply to this modern economy that we have in the United States, kind of a global economy with derivatives and everything, but especially with the influence of state-backed institutions, the Federal Reserve System, and what state corporatism actually looks like, the dangers of this kind of collusion between, um, you know, special interests and the government and the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, we live in a corporatist society. I know people call it capitalism. That's such a muddy word that can be molded to whatever, somebody believes capitalism to be. But one thing that cannot be denied is that the government and the major big corporations, crony corporations, are in league with one another. They look out for one another. If you look at COVID as an example of how corporations were following whatever the government was saying, even though it turned out to be all wrong, the corporations and the state are, tied to the hip. Uh, More so the big corporations, the ones that have interest. My local pizza shop is not tied to the state, so they were different during COVID than, say, a Home Depot or a Best Buy or one of the big major publicly shared corporations. So we live in a corporatist state. It's not a new idea. It's very old. In fact, it was very popular in the early 1900s with Mussolini, even Hitler to a certain extent, where corporations and the state were molded together. So that's what we have. We obviously don't have the ideologies of a Hitler or Mussolini, but economically speaking, we have the same thing of corporations and the state being together. And they're all held together by the Federal Reserve monetary system. That is the lifeblood, the beating heart of the corporatist state. So interest rates and centrally planned money go hand in hand with the government and the corporations working together. So we do not have free markets. Whenever there's a downturn, recession, depression, right away, there's too much freedom. This is free market capitalism run amok. We don't have anything even close to that. But
Mhm.
that appeals to the people because then they say, well, the government needs to do something. And if the people say the government needs to do something, the government is very happy to do even more. So they'll entrench themselves even more into the economy, even though what they have done is what created the mess in the first place.
Well, the myth that the United States is a capitalist society, and you have people that are ignorant to the real structure of this country. Um, that how do you reach people? How do you dispel this myth other than to talk about it? How do you explain it clearly? Could you reference the fact that what I've done in the past is talk about the Communist Manifesto, and the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto is a strong central bank,
Mm-hmm.
which is, what is, where's the disconnect, or how do we explain this to somebody when they're saying, we need to be a communist society because obviously capitalism doesn't work, and this, you know, and then you talk about the difference between how this country was created versus what has happened with the Federal Reserve Act and the 16th Amendment, and you know kind of a takeover of our economy. That the I guess what I'm trying to ask you is what really provides human freedom and what doesn't, and how do you break that down in a simple way?
Well, when our country was founded, it was, compared to today, radically decentralized. The states considered themselves to be their own countries. That's how firm they were.
Mhm.
Thomas Jefferson believed himself to be a citizen of Virginia first, before any United States, and they all, to a extent, were very jealous of their local uh, states, their local economies. So you didn't have at that time uh, a centralization that would occur, post Civil War. Now, that's not to pass any judgments on the Civil War, but one of the effects was that we had a centralized power in D.C. and the states lost their autonomy. It didn't have to end that way, but it did end that way. The states could have gone back to being what they were without slavery, and and decentralized still, but that's not what happened. Instead, slavery was gone, but now everybody obeys what happens in DC. When you have that, now you sacrifice what happens in your states. And I love being an American, but when I go to Texas or Florida, I live in New Jersey, or Virginia, any other state, it's pretty much a carbon copy of my state. You'll have local restaurants, you'll have some local flavor, but you can see the corporatist centralization is spread throughout our entire society. That was not how our country was founded. And that's not how it was supposed to be. You'd have your local cultures, your local businesses, your local flavors. That is gone. We're still all Americans. I love traveling the country. But as far as economic wise, there is a centralization that, what we're talking about here, that is like an octopus that has spread throughout our country. And these corporations are so big now that it's spread throughout the world too. So, and all of it, like I said, is centered around the printing press at the Federal Reserve, because what they manufacture, which is counterfeit dollars, is a part of every single transaction. So that is a tremendous power. It's not local currencies. It's not gold. It's not you trust people. It's we have this dollar that we counterfeit, and we're going to manipulate it to our ends. And what happens in Florida and Texas and New Jersey, we'll think about it politically. Will it hurt us politically? But our ends come first. And that's how monetary policy is conducted. And instead of having decentralization in our country, we have this centralized power, which dictates to everyone.
Senator Paul said that you can't borrow your way out of debt, and you can't print your way out of prosperity. You're talking about the Federal Reserve and how they have two kind of primary tools in their toolkit. One is to print money, and the other is to adjust the interest rates. Right. Mm-hmm. So, how does this align with the critique of kind of Keynesian policies? We live in a Keynesian society, mm-hmm. and so I'm going to use that term based on the way our economic policies are, and Fed's reliance on the inflation of the money supply and what Trump's tariffs and mineral deal plans are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You cannot create prosperity by printing money. All you're doing is devaluing the money that already exists. So if I have a Mickey Mantle rookie card, and all of a sudden, now it's rare and it's thousands of dollars, and I have this card, and all of a sudden someone says, hey, we looked in the basement of the card company and they actually printed 1 million more. What would happen to the value of my card that was thousands of dollars? It would drop. Mm-hmm. Price, and so when you counterfeit dollars, what you have in your wallet, the value of it drops, and we don't see it, like we don't get a tax bill. We go to the supermarket and eggs are $10 because the value of the money has dropped because they counterfeited the money. Now, why would they do this? They do it for their own benefit, not for us. They do it because if they want to start a program and they need money, they don't send us a tax bill. They will print the money. And it seems like, oh, they could just do this. And they do just do this. But as they do it to pay for their new program or for their war, we're being taxed. Again, not directly with a bill, but look at the prices around us. Our prices rise relentlessly. and it's extreme now, or more extreme than normal, but it's always rising because we've been living in this inflationary economy since the early 1900s. So they're devaluing our lifestyle when they print money. And they do it because the benefit of printing the money goes to the person that has it first. So if you had a printing press in your basement, which is illegal, and you printed the money, you can now go into the economy with this counterfeit money that you just counterfeited just today. And you can, with your money, buy whatever you want. And your money drives up prices. It's like if you had an auction at Sotheby's, and you give somebody, hey, here's $1,000,000, I just printed it. That person now can drive up the price at the auction. So that's how it trickles through the economy. The people that get the money first, the corporations, the cronies, the government, the banks, they go into the economy and they drive up prices with the new money. So that's the benefit to them. They didn't do anything for it. And the rest of us, we sit and watch the prices go up. So it does not create prosperity. It's fraud and it's criminal. It's actually unconstitutional to counterfeit. But, we have a government that doesn't care about the Constitution most of the time.
So on the flip side, we have Doge, we have Trump trying to implement programs like on in terms of tariffs. There's an argument that it's really a negotiation tool, that it's not really a policy. And I don't know how you can set a policy based on that sort of methodology of, trying to use that for leverage against other countries to be able to get a benefit from that, and use that to to force a reaction that you're expecting out of that. You can't make that an ongoing policy from administration to administration, because it's only him doing it. So what happens when the next person comes in? They're not Donald Trump. They're not using that same methodology. They don't have the same kind of mind. So it's really a temporary kind of approach. It's not really a sound monetary approach in the respect that you need a consistent baseline of how you're going to approach tariffs, right? So could you talk a little bit about tariffs and in specificity, because there's a lot of debate around that. Some people think, oh, it's a great idea, but only in the context of possibly using it as a tactic. It's really almost like it's not a policy though, in that sense. So could you kind of talk a little bit about tariffs and what that means, and how it could either hurt us or help us?
Yes, I am not a fan of tariffs. On the other hand, as you mentioned, I understand the people that are fans of tariffs. I understand their mentality behind it. Uh, Tariffs are very risky, especially in our country. We have had two major events that were tied to tariffs. The Civil War started over the Morrill tariff, where the South did not want to pay. Uh, it was the highest tariff, I believe, in history at the time. And that was what caused them to say, that's it, we're out. So that led to 600,000 deaths in America, the Morrill tariff. Then you had in the 1920s the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which got out of hand. And that's one of the things with tariffs is
Did that cause the Depression in the
it
1920s?
was instrumental. I mean, the Fed had a lot to do with it, but Smoot-Hawley was definitely a part of the story.
Mhm.
So, and I would say a major part of the story. You can't say just this one thing caused it, but it was the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were instrumental.
And was
So
that more of a Republican?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I believe
Okay.
it was.
Mhm.
So tariffs can be dangerous because egos get involved. Trump says, I'm going to slap 25% tariffs on you. Another country says, who do you think you are? You can't do that. We will do 25 on you. And then the egos get involved. And now everybody, and then that's how they start to pile up. And
Mhm.
now everything starts to freeze because, that's what happens. This is how people can be when egos get involved. So once you go down this road, that's where it could end up. And it's dangerous. The problem with America is we live under the biggest government in the history of the world.
Mm,
What Doge is exposing is the problem. If we want businesses to come here, we have to be competitive. And it's not just labor. People say, no, it's cheap labor. It's cheap labor.
mm,
It's a pain to go to another country, learn their culture, learn their language, learn their rules, understand their government, and invest there. It's more than just labor. It's just here in America, we are swimming in oceans of bureaucracy. And what Doge is doing is excellent if it, but there's just so much of it that how much are they going to be able to peel away?
mm,
Uh, that's how you make America competitive again. That's how you get creativity again in our country. People thinking, hey, I'll go start a business. We're
mm.
at the point where lemonade stands and garage sales, you have to go get a license and a permit from the government. That's how the minutia has strangled us even on the local level. So make it attractive for businesses to come here, and then
Mm.
you won't have to worry about tariffs. But Trump wants a quick, look at the results I'm getting, and he is playing with fire with tariffs. Nobody knows the future. Maybe it'll turn out okay, but it is playing with fire. Go instead to the root of the problem and get government out of our lives. But that's a big ask. A lot of people don't want that. Maybe not even Trump ultimately, but that is what will ultimately make us competitive once again.
Well, that kind of leverage and that kind of approach is I think unique to somebody like him. But in terms of policy, it's sounds to me like it's based on what you're talking about, it's a terrible
Mm.
approach to policy. So how do we pay down the debt? And something really interesting that's coming out now, and there's some ideas that I think Trump has thrown out there that people haven't liked, like let's go turn Gaza into
Mm.
Panama City Beach. That's doesn't sound like
No.
that's very exciting for people. But the idea of if somebody wants to be in this country and they go through the process of becoming a citizen of this country legally, which my family did. I'm first generation American. My father came here in 1950,
Mhm.
and they went through Ellis Island, took a TB test, signed their names, and started the process and became a citizen. And he served in the United States military and was very proud American. And that's how a majority of immigrants are. They come to this country, they're very proud to be here. They're excited about the possibilities. They love, our fundamentals, our freedoms. And but Trump is offering an idea to pay down the debt. And what he has said is that we will have not just a green card, but we'll have an elevated card called the gold card. And that is a $5 million fee that the immigrant would have to pay to become, or the company that's sponsoring them. Let's say an American company like Apple, they're investing $500 billion in the United States now, which is great to see. But let's say they want to recruit, certain individuals that are going to benefit their business. They could pay a $5 million fee and sponsor that person to come over, and that would be another way to do it. But Trump has actually said 1 million immigrants at $5 million is $5 trillion to pay down the debt. What are your thoughts on that?
On the surface, it makes a lot more sense than leaving the border open and letting 10 million of people that you have no idea who they are come in. Trump is at least thinking. There's an economic aspect to it. If someone's paying $5 million for this person to come in, economically speaking, this is they obviously think they're worth $5 million, the corporation, if they're willing to pay it. So it's not criminals coming in. So from an economic standpoint, what can you you can't argue with that. There's more to being a citizen here than just economics. Like you mentioned, my family is the same. They came from other countries legally, very hard to get in. My grandfather had to come here first and then bring my family. Very hard. You couldn't just come in. You'd have to have a sponsor, job, everything. And when they came here, they became Americans. Their country, as much as they loved their former countries, they were not a part of it anymore. They were Americans. So that is a very important part of being an American that has been shattered, unfortunately, with immigration over the last few decades, especially. So, but economically speaking, Trump is at least thinking, and it makes sense from that perspective. I mean, I guess we'll have to see going forward how this is, but I can't criticize it, right off the bat.
Thank you to the Rand Paul Review community for your support of The Kurt Wallace Show. We are now syndicated on Spotify. For those who are new to Rand Paul Review, become a subscriber today. It's absolutely free to join. Go to randpaulreview.com, put in your email address. You'll receive our newsletter, articles, and podcast interviews. We just ask that you share our content with others. If you like what you're getting from Rand Paul Review and you want more, I encourage you to become a paid subscriber for just $8 a month. You'll receive full access to exclusive articles, behind the scenes interviews, and the community chat room. Plus, we're giving away tons of swag in 2025. Annual subscribers get 20% off, so check that out. Whether you're a free or paid subscriber, thank you for your participation and support at randpaulreview.com. Let's stay on the subject of Trump and also Doge. We have the Department of Education. I'm sorry, the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, Department of Education. That may be going away.
Yeah.
It aims to cut federal spending, but Congress keeps pushing inflationary spending. And it's, Ron Paul calls it an inflationary hidden tax. And it's the most egregious tax because you can't really see it directly, but it's instrumental in the behavior of the Federal Reserve System. We don't know everything that the Federal Reserve does. We don't know what foreign entities and what other corporations they're loaning money to because we haven't been able to audit them. But it's arguably the most dangerous inflationary tool, right? Is government spending. From the Austrian lens, does Doge even matter if Congress doesn't change its ways? And tariffs and charging immigrants $5 million, is that a band-aid or to a fundamentally broken system, or what difference does it make if the Federal Reserve still has its capabilities?
Yeah. Well, I'll start it this way. What Doge is doing is incredible. One thing that right from the beginning, even before day one, before it even started, I noticed some Republicans were already getting on board in the Senate, in the House, praising what Doge is going to do. And I thought to myself, when I was looking at who these people were, I thought, I hope that this isn't just a partisan thing where they're just going to go after the Democrat stuff, which is what they've been doing, which is necessary and good. And it's easiest in a Republican administration to go after the Democrat stuff. But I hope it doesn't just end that way. Like I remember seeing Senator Joni Ernst praise, oh, there's all these empty buildings and we're going to cut and all this waste. Yeah, Senator Joni Ernst voted for $95 billion to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and all that. Are they going to find 95 billion worth of empty buildings? I worried at the very beginning that the Republicans will just steer Doge away from their pet projects and what they want and Republican spending. And unfortunately, it's looking that way based on the House spending bill. The House is going to have deficits and spending as if Doge doesn't exist, and what Doge is doing doesn't even matter. They're thumbing their noses at Doge, the Republicans. So this was the issue, and we've been talking about it on the Ron Paul Larry Report. We will know that Doge has done a good job when both the Republicans and the Democrats are furious with them. Right now, it's just the Democrats, rightfully so. They're getting hammered. Their pet causes are getting hammered, as they should be. But it would be a terrible tragedy for our country if it ends that way and all the Republicans spending on wars and crony capitalism and all the Republican stuff stays. Because this has been a Republican and Democrat, people call it the uni party problem that we have in our country. It's not just the Democrats, as bad as they are. It's Republicans too, with a few exceptions. Senator Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, my favorites. Uh, Besides them, Congress is a swamp, for the most part. And it's not just the Democrats that are going to have to pay for Doge. And so far, as of today, this interview, that's how it is. I hope it changes so that our country can get the benefits of both sides, getting a haircut on all the waste that they fund.
Well, you have Doge, and you also have MAGA's pushback against the deep state. Could that shift this dynamic of, kind of government jobs created, destroying taxes, the regulations in the private sector that's strangling? Yeah, the Republicans they talk a good game
Yeah.
on deregulation, but like you said, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's really establishment kind of approach, and also the investigation around what kind of kickbacks or what kind of buyoffs, because these politicians, they go in, they're making X amount of dollars per year as a congressman or a senator, and they walk out being filthy rich. So Doge, I guess, is part of that investigation. I mean, there's a whole new cabinet that's wide open. Their eyes are open, and we need sunlight on that. That pushback from MAGA, are they going to? This is really where their concerns are, right? They want to get elected again. They don't want to be. They don't want to be sitting there with their eyes, blind to what this movement's been all about, right?
Yeah, I sympathize a lot with MAGA. Not on everything, but most things. One thing, as somebody that comes from the Ron Paul sphere, is, and this ties to what can be done instead of tariffs, and that's to dismantle our empire that we have overseas. We have 1,000 bases. I mean, if you want to talk about waste, nobody else has this type of military peppered all over the world. I mean, if you have nearly 1,000 bases in something like 70 countries, you know how much money can be saved from that? China, and even if you're afraid of China, and China has one foreign base in Djibouti, Africa. That's it. I mean, but I don't know if MAGA has the stomach or desire for that. It's pound the Democrats, which I'm all for that. But let's stop with trying to be the policeman of the world. It's not necessary anymore. It probably never was necessary. But if we have $1 trillion a year going to so-called national defense and all these endless wars, and President Trump is trying to get it, he's getting us out of Ukraine. He's making peace with Russia and China. I mean, this is all good stuff. Go the next step and bring the troops home. Have them defend our country, defend our border, whatever. Just they don't belong in 70 nations. I mean, we wouldn't like it if a foreign nation had bases all surrounding us. Nobody does. Nobody's doing that to us. But we do that all over the world. And it's, that's a huge, huge thing. But it's also hugely entrenched. And that's where I think MAGA, who knows, maybe they'll surprise me. If they could get on board with that, then wow, we really are changing to an America First country.
Why do you think that there are so many bases around the world? It's under the guise of policing the world, but is there something more sinister or something deeper behind that? Maybe economically?
My guess is, economically speaking, they're just, it's kind of like any department, like we're finding out with Doge. A lot of this stuff shouldn't exist in the first place. But it's very easy to start something in government, but then taking it away, even if it's completely unnecessary, it just doesn't happen because it'll politically hurt you. So nobody does it. My guess is a vast majority of those bases, you could close it and nobody would know a thing. They're just not necessary.
Hmm.
but it projects strength. There's a lot of mythology that goes along with our empire. So it projects all of that. And if there is a war, you already have people there, bases, you could have refueling station, the whole thing. But I don't know if wars are going to be fought that way in the future. It doesn't look like that's how it's going to be. It's not going to be like World War II and all that kind of stuff. So they're probably, first off, I think philosophically they're unnecessary. We're not, that's not the purpose of our country, is to police the world.
Mhm.
But even if we uh, give a little and say, well, how many of these bases are absolutely necessary? I'm sure it's very, very few.
Yeah, and you had recently written in a X post about if you don't spend your budget, you risk losing it, and that's kind of the mentality of government departments, right? They have to continue to grow and justify their existence. So uh, their overspending leads to increases or something like that, is what you
Yes.
said in there. And that's not fiscal responsibility of government. That's just how government is. That's like the nature of government, because they don't have any oversight. There's nobody saying, "Hey, you've got to meet the bottom lines, and we have a profit to make." Or I mean, they just don't operate. They're not a profit making organization. They don't think like that. They don't operate like that.
No, because government taxes, that sets them apart from everyone else. We can't tax.
Mm,
I can't go to my neighbor and say, I'm taxing you $50, hand it over, or else. So, and if I'm a business, I can't force anybody to buy whatever I'm selling. I can't tax them. A person, if you hate Walmart, you don't ever have to step in Walmart as long as you live, and Walmart can do nothing about it to you. Uh, Government is not that way. If you don't pay your taxes, they're coming for you. So their incentive is not the same as everyone else. The money just keeps coming in because they could just keep taxing you, and especially when they could print the money, that's even more they can tax us.
mhm,
So yeah, if when you have a government organization, uh, your incentive, that doesn't mean that everybody does this, but your incentive, if you want a bigger budget, is to spend all of the money that you have. And then you can say, we're doing this and it's so important and all these people rely on us, but we just don't have enough money. We had to spend it all. Well, okay. If the politician politically thinks it's a beneficial to the politician, you say, well, raise your budget. And now you just got rewarded with a bigger budget by spending all the money you had before. Now, if you're more responsible in
mm,
government, and you don't spend it, well, then you can't go ask for a budget increase. The other department will. They spend all their money. That's the incentive system in government. That's just how it is. It's the opposite of a business. You spend all your money, you better hope you have clients that are going to pay you more for your products or your services. There's nobody to run to that's taxing to get a budget increase. So that's why government is fundamentally different than us, and
mm,
it just snowballs when you have, and everybody, they talk about cuts in government as a decrease over in percentage over the prior increase. So if one year the budget goes up 10% and the next year it goes up 8%, it still went up 8%, but they call it a cut because it's not 10% like the year before. That's their logic in government. So, and that's how we got into $37 trillion in debt. It's just a big avalanche that and now we have the Trump administration and Doge that are trying to fix this thing. But it's a big avalanche, for
big
sure.
avalanche. It's I remember Ron Paul always returned money back to the congressional. I don't know exactly what the term is, but the congressional budget, I think is it, because he never spent that tax money or that borrowed money uh, on his office like all the others. They would all max out their congressional budget. I think Rand is probably the same way, and
Mhm.
probably Thomas Massey is probably the same way as well. They're very frugal around that because it's the responsible thing. It's actually the moral position, and government doesn't take a moral position because it's not a human being.
Mhm.
It's a massive buy-in. It's a
Mhm.
matrix, and what started this part of the conversation was the talk around the military bases around the world and what causes that. And this makes a lot of sense that this is kind of the impetus for uh, growth of our military the way it has been. Also, the contracts with the big companies that provide military weapons, and you can't really justify military spending unless you use the military. And so that's where the neoconservative agenda and um, the establishment and the uniparty have really pushed all these conflicts around the world. We got Lindsey Graham, who you know goes back and forth. He's kind of the last of those, and he's trying to stay relevant by kowtowing. But I guess one other piece of this is on the military budget, you said $1 trillion. Is it possible that the Federal Reserve wants to? This is just a theory that I've heard about and I've talked to people about. Is it possible that that is the goal of a strong military presence worldwide? Is to prop up the U.S. dollar, to force or intimidate or coerce or manipulate people around the world into using the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency.
Yeah, well, based on who the bad guys are, they're often the bad guys. They're people that don't want to use the U.S. dollar anymore. I know Gaddafi was one. Saddam
Mm,
Hussein was another. There have been many of them, and all of a sudden, they're the enemy that the U.S. has to go bring them freedom,
mm.
and then it's what they tell us. But in essence, the dollar remains. So
And
yeah, yeah.
with those two examples, Gaddafi had decided to create a gold backed security and like a gold back African
Hmm.
currency. Is
Hmm.
that is
Yeah,
that what you're referring to?
yeah.
And then we took him out, or the Obama administration took him out, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And I
and
believe Saddam Hussein was along those same lines, the same thing.
because he had said he wasn't going to accept U.S. dollars for his oil anymore. He was going to accept yen and euro, correct?
The details I forget because I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I remember it was something like that. Uh,
He basically was challenging and
yes.
affecting the U.S. dollar as a value because I can't remember what uh, the amount of oil in Iraq was, but it's like a fourth of the world's
Yeah.
oil or
Right.
something like that at the time was
Right.
being produced out of Iraq.
Right.
So that's a threat. So maybe that's where the lie came from for the weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
Could it be that these bankers are yielding policy in the United States
Oh,
on a
of
military
course.
level? Okay.
And we're talking about the military. I have tremendous respect for someone that joins the military to defend our country. Tremendous.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's not what joining the military means. You could be off in Iraq or, like we said, 70 countries. That's not defending America. If they were
Mm.
defending America, my goodness, thank you. Uh, but but if you're going, into a war that has nothing to do with America or America's interests, which they don't, then I feel bad that's especially someone that joined to defend America. I feel bad, but you join the military, that you do what they tell you to do. So you can't blame the troops, but you
Mhm.
can blame the people that send them there. And that's yeah. So a lot of these wars, and that's why we don't have to live like this. But we have for so long, and it's become such a part of the psyche of America that the average person will say, just go bomb them, just go bomb them. It's just they shoot from the hip, like this is normal behavior. We shouldn't be involved in any of this stuff. We should take care of our country. Our country has been used and abused beyond belief. We really have no business worrying about the rest of the world. We are not there yet. We are there a lot in rhetoric about America first, but until those bases are closed and the troops come home and we stop with all of this intervening in Libya and Syria and Iraq and Iran and everywhere else, then we are going nowhere. We're spinning our wheels. And that's another thing that we said at the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Is the Trump administration putting America first, or are they going to try to save the American empire, make it more lean and mean, and just keep this empire? I don't think they could do it, but is that their goal? I hope that's not their goal. But we have to bring these troops home, close these bases, live like a normal country. There's people out there in the world that their country never even considers any of the stuff that we talk about here, because they're not peppered all over the world. It's just you join the military, you defend Norway, you defend this, you defend, uh, but we've been down this road for over a century, and it's very tough to reverse, not just with the political will, but with the mentality of the country, because things get worse. And it's a choice between, hey, do you want a war or do you want a social security check? Choose the social security check. Take care of the people at home, and heck with all the wars. That's enough of them. They've done nothing to serve us. It's not like these wars, they fight them and be like, oh, look at all this money we brought back for you. All we do is pay, and our standard of living goes down, and we go further into debt. They've done nothing for us, but they have done plenty for all the people that are connected to the military industrial complex. Once that stops someday, and it will, because it's going to have to, math can't be overcome. It's just, how bad will our country be at that point? Better to handle it before you get into a complete economic crisis. And
Yeah,
we'll see.
Well, we already are.
Yeah.
I mean, there's and then we have the proxy wars of 300 billion in Ukraine, and everything that's been funneled into the Middle East. But
Yeah.
that hasn't helped us. And even if we plundered Ukraine's, if Russia was even going to allow that, so we'll see how that plays out. But Chris Rossini, we're coming to an end, but I have a final question for you, and on an up note or a positive kind of possibility. Ron Paul often emphasizes that true economic freedom means letting the markets set interest rates, not a central authority, and prices, set by the market, by what people are willing to spend when the government doesn't mess with it. That's kind of how a lot of the technologies are still free from that. But the Fed is a monopoly over the money supply, and monopolies always fail the consumer. That's a Ron Paul type statement. How do you think his push for competing currencies, talking about Ron Paul's push for competing currencies, or a gold standard, or crypto as a possibility? He doesn't really talk about that as much, but how that could counter the Fed's tactics, like those that we're seeing now, and would it rein in Congress's inflationary spending?
Yeah, there's nothing really more important than sound money. Outside of morality, obviously you need morality first. Otherwise you're living, jungle law. But economically speaking, there's nothing more important, because like I mentioned earlier, our money is a part of every single economic transaction. And the Federal Reserve does not know what interest rates should be any more than I do or that Rob Paul does. Prices are not fixed by a central authority. If somebody came to me and said, here's a Nike sneaker, what's the price of it? Well, have a buyer and a seller, and if they both agree on a price, there's your price. Don't ask me. I'm not buying it. I'm not selling it. That's the Fed. They fix prices, and they mess things up. They'll take uh, interest rates down to zero artificially, because that's not normal, or even 1% or whatever. And people will go and say, oh, look, interest rates are so low. Let me take all this money and go build a house and go build. And then it distorts the economy. I remember the housing bubble like it was yesterday. People flipping houses like they're flipping stocks, because the money was so cheap. And it's because the Fed created that environment that happened in the first place. The dot-com bubble was the same. All the bubbles, it's all the same, because it's artificial. and everything artificial has to collapse, and everything has collapsed. And we just keep going like a roller coaster, up and down and up and down. So the cure for this is sound money, but there is no will for the people that, believe that they're in control of the world. They need this printing press because they'll print the money and do what they want with it. It's a very tough situation, especially when you have a population that, for the vast majority, don't understand this. Now, many more than before, especially with the help of Ron Paul. But still a vast majority of people have no idea. They just think that, this is the way it is. But it's very abnormal because we have a counterfeiter. And hopefully someday that comes to an end.
Out of all the libertarian ideas, a lot of them have become kind of mainstream. They're in the national discussion, but this one is not grabbing people as much. In terms of sound money, well, honest money is really a better way to describe it, because we live. What's the difference? We have a dishonest money system right now. It's dishonest. And we need an honest money system. Hopefully that'll catch fire. That's really, I think that's the next level. And that is the deepest, most important level, because that's the foundation of whether you have a free society or you have a corrupt society. And right now we don't. We have a corrupt money system. So, Chris Rossini, thank you so much for indulging us at Rand Paul Review, and look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you, Kurt.
Genius.